insults and violence.
Blessed are they who are meek, for they shall possess the earth.
Matt 5:4.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God.
Matt 5:9.
You have learned what was said to the ancients. You shall not kill, and whoever kills shall deserve being condemned to judgment. But I say to you that whoever shows anger against his brother shall deserve being condemned to judgment. Whoever says to his brother Raca shall deserve to be condemned by the council, and whoever says to him, You fool, shall deserve being condemned to the fire of hell.
Matt 5:21-22. With these maxims, Jesus makes meekness, moderation, docility, affability, and patience a law. Consequently, he condemns violence, anger, and even any discourteous expression regarding another person. Raca, to the Hebrews, was a term of scorn that meant a worthless person and was said while spitting and turning one's head to the side. Jesus goes even further, since he threatens with the fire of hell anyone who says to another person, You fool. As in every circumstance, it is obvious that here that the intent increases or attenuates the wrong. But how can a simple word have enough gravity to deserve such a severe reproach? It is that every offensive word expresses a sentiment contrary to the law of love and charity, which should regulate human relations and maintain harmony and unity in them. That such a word is an insult to mutual benevolence and fraternity. That it encourages hatred and animosity, and lastly, that after humility toward God, charity toward one's neighbor is the first law for every Christian. What did Jesus mean by these words? Blessed are they who are meek, for they shall possess the earth, since he stated that one should renounce the things of this world in order to receive those promised in heaven? While waiting for the things of heaven, people have need of the things of the earth in order to live. He only advises them not to attach more importance to the latter than to the former. By these words, Jesus means that up till now the things of the earth have been monopolized by aggressive persons to the harm of those who are meek and peaceable. That the latter often lack the necessities, while the former have the superfluous. He promises that justice will be rendered to the meek and peacemakers on earth as in heaven, for they shall be called children of God. When the law of love and charity is the law of humankind, there will be no more selfishness. The weak and peaceable will no longer be exploited or crushed by the strong and aggressive. Such will be the state of the earth, when, according to the law of progress and the promise of Jesus, it becomes a blessed world through the expulsion of bad individuals.
The Spirit's teachings. Affability and meekness.
Benevolence toward one's fellow beings, the fruit of love toward one's neighbor, produces the affability and meekness that are its manifestation. However, one must not always trust in appearances. Good manners and worldly skill can lend the veneer of those qualities. How many there are whose feigned good nature is no more than an outward mask, a garment whose premeditated form covers up hidden deformities. The world is full of such individuals, who have a smile on their lips and venom in their hearts, who are meek as long as nothing angers them, but who bite back at the least contrariety, whose silver tongue when they speak to your face changes into a poisoned arrow when they speak behind your back. To this class belong also the men and women who seem benign on the outside but who are really domestic tyrants, making their families and subordinates suffer the weight of their pride and despotism as though wanting to throw off the restraints imposed on them elsewhere. Not daring to use their authority on strangers who would put them in their place, they want to at least be feared by those who cannot resist them. Their vanity rejoices at being able to say, "Here I command and am obeyed," without thinking that they could very well add, "And I am detested." It is not enough for lips to flow with milk and honey, because if the heart does not do the same, it is hypocrisy. Those whose affability and meekness are not feigned never belie themselves. They are the same, both in the world and at home. Furthermore, it is said that even if we are able to fool others by appearances, we do not fool God.
Lazare, Paris, 1861.
Patience. Pain is a blessing that God sends upon the elect. Therefore, do not become troubled when you suffer. Instead, bless Almighty God, who through the pain of this world has marked you out for glory in heaven. Be patient. Patience is a form of charity also, and you must practice the law of charity taught by Christ, the envoy of God. The charity that consists in giving alms to the poor is the easiest of all charities. There is another kind, however, that is much more burdensome, and consequently more meritorious. Forgiving those whom God has placed on our path to be instruments of our suffering and to put our patience to the test. Life is difficult, I know. It is composed of 1,000 nothings, which are pinpricks that end up hurting us. But we must consider the duties imposed on us, and the consolations and compensations we receive in return. Then we will see that the blessings are more numerous than the sorrows. The burden seems less heavy when we look to heaven than when our brow is bent toward the ground. Courage, my friends. Christ is your model. He suffered more than any of you and had nothing for which to reproach himself, whereas you have your past to expiate and to strengthen you for the future. So be patient, be Christians. This word sums up everything.
A Spirit Friend, Haver, 1862.
Obedience and resignation. At all points, Jesus' doctrine teaches obedience and resignation, two very active companion virtues of meekness, although people erroneously confuse them with the negation of sentiment and will. Obedience is the compliance of the reason. Resignation is the compliance of the heart. Both are active forces because they carry the burden of the trials that insensate rebellion allows to fall. The coward cannot be resigned, just as the proud and selfish person cannot be obedient. Jesus was the incarnation of these virtues scorned by materialistic antiquity. He came at a time in which Roman society was perishing in the bankruptcy of corruption. He came to make the triumphs of sacrifice and renunciation of the flesh shine in the bosom of downcast humankind. Every epoch is thus marked with the stamp of either virtue or vice, which must either save it or ruin it. The virtue of your generation is intellectual activity. Its vice is moral indifference. I say activity only, for a genius suddenly arises and single-handedly discovers horizons that the multitudes will see only later, whereas activity is the combining of everyone's efforts to reach a less grandiose goal, but which tests the intellectual advancement of that epoch. Submit yourselves to the thrust we have come to give your spirits. Obey the great law of progress, which is the catchphrase of your generation. Woe to lazy spirits, those who close off their understanding. Woe to them, for we, who are the guides of humankind on the march, will apply the whip and force their rebellious wills by means of the twofold effort of brake and spur. All prideful resistance shall yield sooner or later. But blessed are they who are meek, for they shall lend a willing ear to our teachings.
Lazare, Paris, 1863.
Anger. Pride leads you to deem yourselves to be more than you really are. You cannot endure any comparison that might humble you. On the contrary, pride makes you consider yourselves to be so far above your brothers and sisters, whether in spirit, social position, or personal advantage, that the least parallel irritates and hurts you. And then what happens? You give in to anger. Seek the origin of these outbursts of temporary insanity that make you resemble the brutes, causing you to lose your poise and your reason. Seek and you will find that they are almost always based on wounded pride. Is it not wounded pride at being contradicted that makes you reject wise remarks and makes you angrily reject the wisest counsels? Even impatience, which often causes puerile annoyances, is connected to the importance that one attributes to one's person, before which one thinks everyone else should bow down. In their frenzy, angry persons attack everything from brute nature to inanimate objects, which they crush because they do not obey. Ah! If at such moments they could serenely see themselves, they would either be afraid of themselves or they would discover that they look ridiculous. Let them thereby deduce the impression they must have on others. Even if it were for nothing else but self-respect, they should make an effort to overcome a propensity that makes them an object of pity. If persons were to realize that anger does not solve anything, that it affects their health and compromises their life, they would see that they themselves are its primary victim. However, another consideration should especially restrain them, the thought that they make everyone around them unhappy. If they have a heart, should they not regret making those whom they love most to suffer? What a deadly grief it would be if in a hot-headed outburst they committed an act that they would deplore for the rest of their lives. In sum, anger does not exclude certain qualities of the heart, but it keeps one from practicing much good and can lead to practicing much evil. This fact should be enough to motivate efforts to control it. Moreover, Spiritists are encouraged for another reason. Anger is contrary to charity and Christian humility.
A Protector Spirit, Bordeaux, 1863.
According to the very mistaken idea that one cannot reform one's own nature, people think they are to be excused from putting forth the effort to correct their defects, in which they deliberately delight, or which would require much perseverance. It is thus, for example, that individuals inclined toward anger nearly always blame it on their temperament. Rather than regarding themselves as blameworthy, they blame their faults on their body, thus accusing God for their misdeeds. This is a further consequence of the pride that may be found mixed in with all their imperfections. Of course, there are temperaments that lend themselves more than others to violence, just as there are more flexible muscles that lend themselves better to acts of strength. Nonetheless, do not believe that the primary cause of anger is to be found there. Rather, be convinced that a peaceable spirit, even in an ill-tempered body, will always be peaceable, whereas a violent spirit in a lymphatic body will not thereby be meeker. Instead, the violence will only take on a different character. In not having a suitable organism to second its violence, anger will contract, whereas in the former instance, it will expand. Thus, the body does not give anger to persons who do not already have it, just as it does not provide the other vices. All virtues and all vices are inherent to the spirit. Otherwise, where would the merit and responsibility be? A physically handicapped person cannot make him or herself whole, because his or her spirit has nothing to do with it. But this person can change what is of the spirit if he or she has a firm will. My fellow Spiritists, does experience not show you how far the power of the will can go in light of the truly miraculous transformations that you see happening? So tell yourselves that people remain vice-prone only because they want to remain vice-prone. Those who want to correct themselves always can. Otherwise, there would be no law of progress for human beings.
Hahnemann, Paris, 1863.